The Calgary Police Service Guns and Gangs Unit has made progress with several recent shooting investigations. In the first case, investigators have charged a 26-year-old man following a shooting incident outside a Northeast bar. At approximately 11 p.m. on Sunday, October 5, 2014, following an altercation, several people were ejected from a bar in the 1400 block of 52 Street Northeast. As the two groups continued to argue outside, one of the men pulled out a handgun and fired several shots toward the rival group and the bar. One man was shot in the foot, while several others inside the bar sought cover from other rounds that breached the establishment's exterior. At least one patron received minor injuries from flying glass. Shortly after the incident, warrants were issued for the arrest of Ramin Dadkhuda, age 26, of Calgary. He was arrested at the end of October and charged with multiple weapons offenses, as well as 2 counts of aggravated assault. In the second and unrelated case, officers have charged a local man with attempted murder following a shooting incident also last October in Pine Ridge. On Thursday, October 23rd of 2014, 2 groups of men met in the 6700 block of 26th Avenue Northeast. Both groups arrived in vehicles at approximately 7:30 p.m. As their 2 cars pulled beside one another, shots were fired from one vehicle into the other. The driver of the target vehicle was shot in the face, while offenders fled the area in the second car. 3 days later, on Sunday, October 26, 2014, the offender turned himself into police and was charged. Maninder Singh, age 22 of Calgary, is charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, 5 counts of failing to comply, and multiple firearms offenses. In a more recent case, the Guns and Gangs Unit detectives have charged 2 men in connection with an ongoing shooting investigation at a Northeast home. At approximately 11:30 p.m. on January 1st of this year, police received complaint of a drive-by shooting in the 700 block of Rundleside Drive Northeast. Several people were inside the home at the time of the shooting, however, no one was injured. On January 3rd, following the initial stages of the investigation, a search warrant was executed in the 7000 block of 80th Avenue Northeast. In the course of warrant execution, the following was seized: a loaded handgun with a defaced serial number, over $35,000 cash, approximately $27,000 of oxycodone, and approximately $1,000 of cocaine. Abdullah Amir, age 20, and Azad Ahmed Haji, age 28, both of Calgary, were arrested in relation to the execution of these warrants. Both subjects have been charged with multiple firearms-related offenses, as well as possession and trafficking of a controlled substance, possession of property obtained by crime, and multiple counts of breaching conditions. Links from the results of these warrants to the Rundleside shooting itself are still under investigation, and any related charges specific to that event have yet to be laid. None of these incidents are believed to be random, but rather targeted events. That concludes the formal briefing, and now I'll answer what questions I can.
So can you speak to the timing of this release? It just seems to me that all these arrests were made weeks or months ago. So what's the new information that you're providing us today?
Well, certainly for the most recent one, that is this month. I think you're talking about the 2 October ones that I'm speaking to. In all honesty, there's no specific rhyme or reason to it, except for the fact that since October of last year, we've been quite busy suppressing violence and investigating a series of shootings, and we're just taking some time now to catch our breath and share some of the investigative successes that we've had.
Are there some trends that you can speak to?
In what sense?
Gang trends, drug trends. Are you seeing certain gangs being prevalent here, or certain types of drugs that you're more concerned about than others?
In terms of the certain types of drugs, I can't really give you an answer on that. What I can tell you in terms of the shootings themselves that we're seeing, there's been a few recently, and we're live to that. And the nature, the context, and most importantly, the interconnectivity between them is something that we're actively looking at. Some of these we believe to be related, absolutely. In fact, my inspector was up here about a week ago speaking bluntly to the fact that we do believe some of these subjects are tied to organized crime, specifically the drug trade, a variety of drugs out there, and that some of this violence is tied to friction between some of these loosely associated groups out there. Our job now is to figure out which ones are and which ones aren't. There's some that we certainly believe are, others that we have removed from that equation, but that's all part of what we're doing going forward. trying to connect those dots.
You said that, sorry, so you said the first one and the second one weren't connected, but was the January one connected to the second one?
Yeah, and Nancy, you're right. I've pulled out that second one from Pine Ridge only because we were satisfied that one kind of stands alone. In that it's more interpersonal. There's some history there between rivals. That's how that played out.
Sorry, which one are you talking about?
The Pine Ridge shooting with the attempted murder charge on Ender Singh is the one I'm speaking of.
So the first one on October 5th is related to January 1st?
That's one of the things that we're looking at. The first and third incidents that I'm speaking of today, we're looking at, are those connected, and how do they connect to some of the previous shootings as well that my inspector spoke of last week.
And for the January 1st one, they haven't been charged for the shooting. They were
it's confusing.
How did that all play out?
Yeah, how it played out was this. So the shooting happens, and we begin to investigate. In the course of the investigation, between the investigative work being done, assistance from the public, the investigation moved forward. Search warrants were written and executed at a separate residence. There was evidence gathered in relation to the search warrant specific that certainly is suspect for us, and we're looking to link it back, but we need forensic examinations done, particularly on the weapon in question. So we're certainly able to lay charges for what was found at the residence in question in regards to those two individuals that we've mentioned. But as far as the shooting itself, we're waiting to make those investigative connections to lay those charges.
But the house was searched because of the shooting?
Absolutely. The search warrants were in relation to the Rundleside shooting.
Are you investigating any of the four men mentioned in the release for unsolved homicides?
Honestly, you'd have to speak to homicide about that.
Are you working with the homicide unit?
We collaborate with them on suppression efforts in terms of trying to head off future acts of violence, but the inner workings of their investigation, for instance, the first two shootings this year involving those deaths, I don't know much about those. I can't speak to them.
Like these aren't related to those?
I do not believe they are, no.
I'm not talking about the first two homicides.
Okay.
So I'm talking about the Jason Quinn Antonio. Do you
Right.
know if he's connected in any way to anything?
And that would no doubt be something that we're looking at globally, trying to put the pieces together, and how does it all play out, absolutely.
And so is that homicide of Antonio, though, related to these?
That's one of those things I can't speak definitively to because we don't have all the pieces yet, but as all these things happen and we get more information from the public, those are the kinds of pieces that we're trying to put together. And in fact, as I say that, it's really important to reinforce, because what we don't talk about often is the suppression work going on behind the scenes, the resources and the time that we are spending while we run these investigations trying to keep the public safe by suppressing future acts of violence. And so much of that, I mean, the reason why I can stand here and share investigative success and the reason why we can move forward and try to prevent future acts of violence is the cooperation that we get from the public, which helps us do these things, including make those kinds of connections. I would encourage anybody out there that has information on any of these events or any of the things going on between these individuals and these groups to help us out, to step up, come forward and share what they know. I would encourage anyone out there to go to our gang reduction website at cpsgrip.com, cpsgrip.com. When you go there, you're going to find a host of resources and a lot of different ways to contact us, including anonymously through Crime Stoppers, if that's your preference.
We just did a story about HEAT being disbanded and moved the resources into other areas. Can you say how that's helping to be able to suppress this and being moved around? Because my understanding, guns and gangs is one of the areas.
Okay, yeah, and I wasn't part of the HEAT decision, but what I can tell you is we'll take all the resources that we can get. Stolen vehicles, that's serious business, make no mistake, but right now we're trying to deal with shootings and organized crime, and I think our resources are finite, and so a business decision was made to move some of our resources into our area, and absolutely, we're only going to benefit from having more investigators able to take on some of these investigations and deal with those suppression efforts and try to build some of those relationships to get the public to come forward and cooperate with us and share information. So absolutely.
At all, I mean, in 2006, 7, 8, 9, we had a gang war between two sides. Do you think that's kind of suppressed? Do you worry that that's going to flare up again between other groups, and we're going to have a similar situation with the 20 murders?
We're always concerned about something like that, and we're not there yet. Let's be clear about that. What I can tell you is what's going on in the organized crime world. Looking back, we always know what's going on. Looking forward, we don't necessarily have that crystal ball, and that's where cooperation with the public comes in. But what I can tell you definitively is the Calgary Police Service today is so much better prepared than we were 10, 12 years ago to deal with things like this. Since those days that you're talking about, when we had that gang war back in the 2000s, we've implemented operational efficiencies. We've got a real-time operations center in place. We never had a guns and gangs unit back there, and quite frankly, we didn't have the kind of experience we could have used back then to deal with matters like that. And going forward at times like this, when we have incidents like this playing out, we are so much better prepared now to employ strategies and tactics based on our own experience to move forward.
How significant is the problem of criminals coming from Toronto, Ottawa, and Northern Alberta?
That is a phenomenon that is not unique to Calgary. The nature of organized crime is it's fluid. It requires local, national, and transnational connections. I mean, cocaine, it comes from South America, right? It has to get here. So the fluidity of organized criminals moving from jurisdiction to jurisdiction is perfectly normal anywhere. That's how this thing works.
But are we seeing more of that right now?
We're seeing what would be in keeping with a city of 1.2 million people. I mean, the reality is this: Calgary gets the organized criminal presence that it deserves. In a sense, they're only here because they sell commodities and services, and there are Calgarians out there buying this stuff up. If I could wave a magic wand and take away Calgary's appetite for illicit substances and services, we would cripple organized crime. That's a reality that we don't see it. I'd love for us to get there one day.
So what's the biggest challenge for your unit right now?
The biggest challenge for us moving forward is to continue to encourage the public to come forward and help us out. If the community steps up and helps us, there's really not much we can't accomplish, but we need that information. And even for people out there that think, it doesn't matter, what I know somebody else probably already told them, there's strength in numbers when they come forward and share with us. There's a variety of reasons for that I can't get into, but it's so important. And so the more help we get, the more we can do. Okay, now you've confused me a little bit. Help me to in terms of the three that I just spoke about right now, which you're talking about, the Rundleside home shooting,
yes.
the
Rundle one, the bar one.
The bar one, Mr. Schnapp's, okay.
And then the one at the co-op on the 14th that you said your inspector, I think, was.
Yes, and in the one he's speaking of, that's still under active investigation, and we are looking to establish ties to what some of the things are we've talked about today, absolutely.
And with these three.
Well, these three minus the one that I've kind of put aside.
So is the co-op one related to these ones?
That's one of the things that we're looking at, absolutely. Yeah.
So has this kind of expanded from outside of this group that we had heard about before? Like, has this group now been divided to some extent?
Well, I don't know how chummy they ever were to begin with, to be quite honest with you, but we still, as my inspector said last week, we still believe this to be isolated within this particular organized criminal community.
This, like all of these three?
No, again, take that. I should have done a separate press release to the other one. The second shooting from Pine Ridge that I talk about, we're putting that off to the side. The Rundleside drive-by shooting and the more recent, I'm confusing myself now, where we find the gun with the defaced serial number. Schnapp's, okay, thank you. Those ones there we're looking at from a broader perspective and linking it back to what you're asking about here.
As well as the co-op?
Yes, yes.
To one organized crime group?
Well, it's... because of the nature of organized crime, it's difficult to pin it down to one group. There are a host of loosely associated networks out there in Calgary that profit from organized criminal activity. And the interplay between these groups is fairly fluid at times, but what I'm saying is you can draw a box around a chunk of them, and within that chunk, there's interplay going on between rivals right now. But it's isolated to that group.
Sorry, what can you tell us about this group? I mean, is it sort of loosely based on an ethnic group, or are there any kind of defining characteristics you can share?
No, these days with organized crime, it defies those kinds of constraints. You've got organized crime in Calgary it's multinational. It's about all ethnicities that play a part in these things to a lesser or a greater degree. And really what binds them is criminal activity, a desire for profit, and greed. It's really that simple.